Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Trends series. Today's topic, improve your claims management. This is a topic I am very excited to present because I have a lot of experience here. And we're going to just begin by introducing our presenters. So first here, we have Steve Heinen joining us, and we'll keep these introductions brief since many of you have been to our series already and have heard all about us. But Steve Heinen is the pioneer and creator of the P4 People Risk Management process and has over 40 years of experience in the risk management industry. We also have Eddie Martinez joining us. He is the vice president of EIG and has over 25 years insurance industry experience, of which 20 years has been devoted to successfully creating, training, and leading an award-winning risk management department. And my name is Zachary Rosenthal. Prior to joining EIG, I had over 15 years of experience handling workers' comp claims with employers through a group of occupational medicine centers based in South Florida. So just some housekeeping before we get started into the content. This training is being certified for 1 HRCI and SHRM credit for HR professionals. Please note that if you are gaining the credit, you need to be in attendance for the full hour in the Zoom. Zoom does track the in and out, so please make sure you're here the full time to receive your credits. Also, at the end of the session, there will be a program evaluation you'll need to complete. So if you are collecting the CEUs, it is required to complete it. We'll put the link in at the end of the chat and also send a follow-up email. And also note, throughout the training, there's going to be 2 keywords presented. You will need those 2 keywords in order to collect your CEU. So please write them down when we get to the keyword and complete the program evaluation. Let's talk about the journey we've taken you on here in the Emerging Trends series. As we were saying, we began back in August in the summer, and now it's already November. We started with the foundation of people risk management and introduced the topic, and that leadership is what it's all about. This process doesn't work without strong leadership and having supervisors ready to implement this program. Then in September, we talked about how to reduce risk with new hires, which focused on P1 and P2 pre-hire and post-offer. Then in October, we got into safety and the importance of accountability, which is P3. And now it's time to talk P4, post-claim, and having a proactive claim to manage workers' comp injuries. Then in December, if you have any fleet or auto, you will definitely want to join this session as we talk more about this topic. And then we're going to finish up in January, focusing on cyber and employment practices. So please stay tuned. And if you want to see any of our previous recordings, go to our website, eigrisk.com, and view the recordings.
Now, we wanted to start this presentation talking about leadership. Leadership is what we've mentioned in each of our webinars, and it's actually the foundation to everything in your company and in your life. If you look at this gentleman with the suitcase, he's on this high wire and he's trying to balance himself on top of the world here. Guess who that is? That's the owner of the company. The owner of the company's got a lot of things going on. He's looking at profits, he's looking at getting new work, he's looking at safety, quality. He's trying to run the business and he's got a lot on his mind. The last thing he wants to do is talk about claims. I've worked in the claims industry for over 25 years and I've helped a construction company with claims. And one of the things that was challenging for me in the claims department was getting leadership involved because leadership had so many other things to do. And when they'd get a claim, they'd call Eddie. Eddie was the claims guy. So part of what we're going to talk about here today is how to involve leadership in the claims process because it's just so important. It's not just important at renewal time, it's important year round. We like to say risk management has no renewal date, which is great because claim management and people risk management is 365 days of the year, not only at work, but at home too. Most of us that deal with claims know that it's not a job for everybody. It's very difficult to keep track of the claims. It's very difficult to remember what happened when there was a claim or an incident. We're going to talk about how to track that, how to go through lessons learned, and how to make sure that an incident doesn't reoccur. And with that said, I'd love to turn over this presentation to Mr. Steve Heinen.
Thanks, Eddie. And great point. I just saw this graphic. Eddie just slipped this in at the last second, but this is an awesome graphic because I want you to think that's the owner of the company. But when you have a claim, all of a sudden, then you put your employee on this high wire, you put the claims adjuster on the high wire, you put your supervisor on the high wire. Everybody's on this high wire together. And you know who's rattling the high wire? The claimant attorney. And usually they rattle it hard enough that somebody falls off. And that's unfortunately what happens. They said 40 years experience. I'm the chief perspective officer at EIG. Okay, just because I got gray hair. I've been involved in almost now 200,000 workers' comp cases. And what I see honestly is the claimant attorneys are just shaking that wire. They're trying to find some way to drive up your anxiety that your insurance company has to settle the claim and throw money at this claim to get rid of it. And what we're going to talk about again is things you can do to mitigate costs by not losing that employee off the high wire. So great, great graphic, Eddie. I'm going to steal that one from you. I steal a lot of stuff from Eddie. So, I didn't know he was going to do that. I've got kind of a Cirque du Soleil thing. And I tell people all the stuff we talk about through this whole series, nothing really matters till it matters. Now, again, I've been involved in so many claims. I was telling the guys tomorrow morning, I got to go by a location because we got a claim getting ready to happen. It hadn't happened yet, but there's a claim getting ready to happen. So I'm going to go do a site survey and I'm going to figure out what can we do to nip this one in the bud before they actually file a claim. So again, everything we talk about, the hardest thing to get across for employers is until it happens to you, it doesn't become important. But because I've seen so many claims, what I try to do is I try to bring that perspective to the table, and hopefully I can share that with you today. So we talk about our P4 process, and we're really proud of this. I developed the process, and again, you guys have heard this if you've been on previous webinars, but if you're new, first of all, Zach mentioned, you can see all the recorded, if you just joined on P4, you can see the first three if you go to the eigrisk.com website and go through those. But I developed this process back in 2000. It really was, I got tasked to lead the claim training for the state of Georgia. So I licensed all the workers' comp adjusters, and I was tasked to really train adjusters how to manage claims. As a frustrated broker, I jumped at that opportunity. But when I got all these big employers in the room, because a lot of self-insured employers really do a good job, I started learning all the things that happen before a person's even hired that impact the cost of claim, from post-offer and obviously prevention that happens before the claim. So we talk about when we put these pieces together, again, we benchmark everything, it will reduce your cost up to 40%. And that's usually the hook we get with clients is we're going to reduce your cost, but more importantly, we're going to put a program to create accountability for the employee. So Zach put this one on there. He changed my slide. It's a perception. And you guys have probably seen this before. Should have been a polling question. What do you see? Do you see a duck or do you see a rabbit? Depending on how your brain works, you're going to see on the left side a rabbit and on the right side a duck, but it's the same picture. What I say is perception in workers' comp is very expensive. And what I mean by that is everybody has a preconceived idea about workers' comp. Your employees do. And we do a lot of employee perception surveys. We talked about that in the last webinar, what employees' feelings are about safety and workers' comp. And a lot of times it's driven not by your company, but by previous places they worked. It's driven by the advertising that the claimant attorneys do and the hundreds of millions of dollars they spend in Florida every year on advertising to tell them your employer will not take care of you. So the perception those employees have about workers' comp is important. The perceptions your supervisors have about managing the workers' comp is important. And we talk about a lot of that in P1, P2, and P3. So this is some of the survey information we've done in the past, and we've shared this with you, but we asked I've done this hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands at this point of times, asking who manages the cost of the claim. And the benchmarking we got from our survey with you guys was 39% said the employer controls 70% of the cost of the claim, the carrier 30%. 32% said employer 30%, carrier 70%, 29% said 50-50. Okay, if I pull adjusters, and again, I put 500 adjusters a year through the certification, I've asked them how much you manage, they would all say 70%. But the truth is, the claims adjuster probably manages about 15% of the claim. It's probably less than
How
20
many,
now.
Steve, how many claims does each adjuster have assigned to them?
You know, they say they try to cap them at 115 lost time claims on their desk open at any one time, but I think it's probably about 150 or 160. So what they
Imagine.
do is they manage by crisis, is they don't get to the important stuff soon because they're handing that 5 alarm fire on the claim that's blown up, is going to a hearing, and the new claim comes in, it doesn't get the attention it deserves, and eventually it catches fire and then something. So they're always working on stuff that catches fire. And there's a lot of turnover. So the good adjusters get overwhelmed, they leave. The bad adjusters stay, and and then the new good adjuster comes and they just hand this whole book of open claims that are already a year old where stuff hasn't been done right. It's a mess. And I know a lot, there are a lot of awfully is probably not, there are a lot of really good adjusters out there, but the system has overwhelmed them. Again, I talked to in the adjuster training about their workload and the demands put on them. But more than that, when you go through the P4 process and understand, we'll talk about this in a second, you understand that the employer cannot transfer the responsibility for managing a claim to the insurance company. It never is going to work out well if you don't, as an employer, own your side of the fence. And we'll talk about that. But then I always talk about the 20/60 rule, and Eddie and Zach hear it all the time when I'm doing training. I apply it to a lot of things in life, but in workers' comp, 20% of the employees, doesn't matter what you do, they got negative charisma. If they get an opportunity, they're going to take advantage of the system. Conversely, you also have 20%. It doesn't matter how poor a job you do managing the workers' comp claim, they're going to do the right thing. They're going to come back to work. And then you got 60% that can go either way. And what I want to tell you is you've got to reach that 60% and pull them over to good, because there's so much out there, billboards and advertising and friends and people that had a claim that, got more money than they deserve. Everybody is telling them, man, you need to go get an attorney. And we know this, when an employee gets an attorney, the cost goes up 350% to the employer. The single biggest cost driver. Eddie talked about leadership. The number one reason employees go and get an attorney is how the supervisors treat them, lack of leadership at the employer level. They're 200 to 300% more likely to get an attorney if the supervisor doesn't have a good relationship with the employee. That's why he talked about why leadership is so important. But just remember this, what we're trying to do is we want to get at least 80% over to the good side. Now, in a great culture, if you're really intentional, you put in leadership training for your supervisor and you really create it, you can probably get 95%. You'll never get 100, but if you can get 95%, that 95% will weed out your bad 5% before they have a claim. They'll say, man, we need to get rid of Joe. He's not the kind of person we want working here. All right, when we talk about claim management, again, I want to go back to this, 85% falls on the employer. Think about this. The claim starts when you hire someone, putting up the information in your drug-free workplace, having written job descriptions at the time of hire, integrity testing, which we talked about in our first or second workshop rather. Then you go to post-offer, you drug test, post-offer health questionnaire. You force the employee to tell you, have they had previous work comp claims? Do they have any history of issues that may cause a problem for them doing their job? Are they physically ready to go? And that married with a job description gives you a powerful 1-2 punch at the time of hiring. And then we're really big on the new hiring process. We've got a risk service team. So you heard about Eddie and Zach's background if you've worked at physicians, but we've got a really good risk team at EIG. And we put together custom new hire training for employers because what we want to do is set the tone from day one that safety is important and accountability. We're going to put accountability in employees. So certainly these things fall on the employer. Then we go over to prevention, the ongoing training. We've talked about supervisor leadership and the return to work process. There is no return to work, by the way, if the employer is not on board. So the insurance carrier doesn't create return to work, the employer does. And it's not a return to work program, it's a process. There's a lot of things that got to happen on the employer side of the fence for return to work correctly. And then we get to the claim. And let's talk about the claim. The claim is managed, the accident reporting comes from the employer. The incident investigation is done by the employer. The management of the claim is done by the employer and the insurance carrier. So that one task is where the adjusters come in. Every other task in this list is done by the employer. So you're frustrated. If you're on this webinar and you're frustrated with your EMOD and the high cost of claims, what you got to do is look in the mirror and say, hey, we've got to take ownership of this stuff. We can't pass a claim to an insurance company and expect a better outcome if we don't own our side of the fence. So that's enough.
How important is accident investigation for the supervisor to be involved?
Well,
Because I know it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Most of the time they lead it. So what I'm going to do is, that's a great question. I'm going to pause that for a couple of slides. I'm going to address that in just a few minutes. So great question, Eddie. Remember, we said 200 to 300% more likely to file a claim if the supervisor doesn't treat them well. It could be they treat them well while they're working, and then they turn the sword as soon as they have an injury. When they do the accident investigation, they're pointing fingers. We're going to talk about that and how you can kind of mitigate some of that in just a minute. But we've got a simple process. We call it take aim. You see the dart boards, 3 darts. You've been with me. I do everything to power of 3. My son's number in basketball was 3. I'm a 3 guy. Probably because I can't remember more than 3 things. But our claim process is pretty simple. The accident happens. What do you do when it happens? The incident analysis and the management of claim. So Zach, did you set up a polling question for
I got a poll ready. I'm ready to launch it. Let's do it. Okay, the poll is up. So if everyone could just put in their responses, which is most important? The accident happens, incident analysis, or the management of the claim? We'll give everyone another 30 seconds to answer.
And the accident happens when you're reporting the claim. Accident happens, what you do when the accident happens.
So yeah, being on the client side for such a long period of time, I found it very challenging to get the supervisors involved in the incident analysis.
Hey, don't give me
and the
any
root
hint until
cause.
they vote. Well, hold on until they vote. Let them vote, Eddie.
Yeah, they're almost done. Okay. 5 more seconds. Last chance to put in your vote. Here we go. We're ending the poll. Okay, here's the results. So 9% said accident happens, 40% said incident analysis, and 51% said management.
Great. All right, go ahead, Eddie. Now share that.
That it's very difficult sometimes when you're working with claim management and you're in charge of claims to get the supervisors involved in the incident analysis and in the root cause, finding the root cause of the claim. Most supervisors just keep working and pushing production, and then you're left with the claims person just kind of picking up the pieces, and that's reality for most companies.
And it's tough because as supervisors tasked with production, now they're a man down.
Yeah.
And you expect them to take time out to show that person care and concern when they're being tasked with, hey, we got to get the job finished if it's construction, or we got to get the keep the production line going. So it's always an inconvenience for a supervisor when a claim happens. I get that, but we've got to overcome it. So I want to talk about this. 9% said what you do at the time of the accident. 40% said the incident analysis. And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer on this, but I want to kind of unpack this. First of all, if you do not have a pre-claim strategy for when the accident happens, it's usually a mess. If the claim starts out wrong, let's say the person is hurt and they don't they don't go to the doctor, they go home and then overnight they go to the emergency room. It's very expensive. They go to the emergency room. The reason they didn't want to go to the doctor during work is they knew they'd be drug tested. They know when they wait and go, they're probably won't get drug tested at the emergency room. So I would tell you, in my mind, the most important thing is what you do immediately when the accident, because that sets the train in motion. And if it's not done right, it's hard to get it back on track. It's just hard to get it back on track no matter what you do. So the accident happens, you're going to get, and we're going to talk about each one of these steps. But then after the claim, you sort of catch your breath. If it's a OSHA issue, particularly if it's an amputation or something that might trigger an OSHA inspection, you're doing a really detailed analysis, but you should do it on every claim. And the reason you do the incident analysis is not to point fingers, but to learn why. And then finally, having a good strategy to manage your claim. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not beating up on adjusters. I love them. I do the certification training for the state. I'm in my 26th year. They're overworked, overwhelmed. It's almost the exception to the rule that I see a claim that is managed from the start to the end of the claim. When I get involved in a claim and I have to review a claim, I find so many missed opportunities on things that could have been done differently that could have changed the trajectory of a claim. So what we try to do with our class is we try to teach them we can't be there for every claim. We've got to teach our clients how to be better at the ground level of managing this stuff and then put the expectation on the insurance company. But I will tell you this, if you're not good at managing all the things we talked about in P1 through P3, when you get to the claim, it's going to be, you're not going to get a great outcome. So you got to work on all four P's. You can't just focus on any one of them, because if any one of those is not managed properly, you're probably going to have a bad outcome when you have a claim. Okay, the accident happens. I'm going to break this down to you in five steps, five things you have to do. First of all, you have to complete the accident investigation form. That is, the WC form you fill for the state. And it's basically the same if you're in multi-state, a little bit different, but every state has their own first report. So you're either calling it in, you're going on your carrier portal. Really, really important that you get the claim turned in quickly. Okay. You got to, I'm getting ahead of myself. Complete the accident investigation form is first. That is getting the employee statement. Before you do anything, when the accident happens, if you're able to, you're going to get the employee statement, you're going to get the supervisor statement, and you're going to get any witness statements. That's the accident investigation form. I'm sorry, I confused you guys. I jumped ahead. You got to do that at the time of the accident. If you don't do it, facts change. Okay? Facts change. Complete that form. And I'm going to go over a form with you that we have. You can reach out to Zach and Eddie if you don't have a good accident investigation form. But that is your internal, hey, this is a statement from the employee. This is a statement from the supervisor. This is a statement from any witness. Okay? I got to tell you, I was in a claim review just yesterday. We had a fall in the parking lot after a person leaving work. And it was idiopathic. They just fell. And idiopathic falls generally, nothing caused it, generally aren't covered under workers' comp. So they had the statement and they had 6 witness statements that they sent to the insurance company. The insurance company took the statement from the employee and also saw the records from the medical provider that the employee tripped on a curb or didn't just slip and fall, trip over their own feet. And that would make it compensable because she tripped over, there was an increased risk. And so it would not be idiopathic. So they accepted this claim. It's a bad claim. She had to be taken by ambulance. She was already out on FMLA. She had a host of medical issues. She exasperated and some of the injuries, and it's going to be a big claim. So we're now 35 days post claim. And we're like, why did you guys accept this claim? They said, well, with the statement. And I said, Did you read the stuff that the employer sent you? Now we're going back to get the video, and we only say video for 30 days. So, that accident investigation of what you get at the time of the accident, it needs to include saving a video clip. And just as a pro tip for you guys, if it's a slip and fall, if it's a back injury, if it's something subjective, a subjective injury, not that a person got their arm crushed in a piece of equipment, that's everybody knows that. But if it's a subjective claim, look at the video of the person coming to work. Look at the person leave, particularly if they file the claim, that night they go to the emergency room and you find out about it and they say they were hurt at work. Don't look at the video just when they were working. Look at the video to and from work and watch them. If they're walking with no limp and they're going to the car and the next day they come in and 10 minutes into the job and you've got them walking into work fine, you got them walking into work limping, they probably didn't get injured at the job. So always remind people, just because somebody's hurting at work doesn't mean they were hurt at work. So completing your investigation form is the employee statement, it's the witness statement, and the supervisor statement. And witness statement could be video. That's a witness statement. Preserve your video. Okay.
What I've found, Steve, with the accident investigation forms, it's very important to get them filled out right away because people forget details. They
Yeah.
forget what happened. They don't even know. I mean, I forget what I was wearing yesterday. So people forget details. So it's very important to get this done right away.
Yeah. Got to do it immediately because facts change.
And it's also important that you train these employees to report the injuries right away, and that there should be a culture in your company that there's no fear of retaliation for having a workers' comp, that employees need to feel comfortable coming forward with any type of injury, whether it's minor to something more serious, and that they don't feel they may lose their job or have any negative consequences for this.
Great point. And that's why Eddie started with leadership. That starts with leadership training with your supervisors. You can't go to them as the owner of the company and say, get them all the supervisors in there because your email goes up, your renewal goes up, and you say, we got to quit having claims. Well, they don't quit having claims. They just tell the employees, hey, get back to work. We can't report claims. So what I want to tell you is completing the accident investigation form. Both points Eddie and Zach made are great points, but then you got to make sure they get proper medical attention. And every state has a little bit different delivery of medical. In Georgia, we got the panel, and the employer gets to pick the doctor, and having a good relationship. That's how we poached Zach. He came from Physicians Health, which a lot of you are familiar with. He's got a great relationship with those clinics. They're now Concentra, but we have access to the people there to help our clients get the right care, and we can make sure we're getting the right paperwork and we're getting addressing return to work on every visit and those kind of things. So it's not only getting them to a good doctor, but also getting to a good doctor that understands workers' comp. Number three, have a refusal of treatment form. If they refuse care, have a refusal of treatment form. You can still drug test them if there's an incident. Even if they refuse care, you can drug test them. You can take them to the clinic, have them drug tested, but have a refusal of treatment form because that will give some documentation to that person that has a claim on Friday and they wait over the weekend and they come in Monday. They're trying to get the drugs out of their system before they file the claim. It doesn't mean the carrier can deny the claim. It's just some good documentation to help your insurance company kind of work that claim in your favor. So number three, refusal of treatment. Number four, which I jumped ahead, is submit the first report timely. I will tell you the tip on that is if you are a company and one person handling, make sure you got somebody cross-trained. The HR person that files the claims is on a 3-week cruise. 30th anniversary, husband takes her on a 3-week cruise. Guess what happens to the first report of injuries? They sit in her inbox. So make sure you have a really good job. Getting timely notice to your carrier is really, really important because not only in one are you getting the accident investigation, but when you get to 4, when you report that claim, they're going to get a recorded statement from the employee. And again,
Steve, I always get this question.
Mhm.
What happens if we want to keep it in-house and not report it to the carrier?
Okay, let me finish this thought and then I'll address that. When you submit a report late, and let's say it sits on someone's desk for 3 or 4 days before you report it, that insurance company adjuster, it should always, as part of their 3-point contact, do a recorded statement of the employee. They're going to get a recorded statement. You've now given that employee 3 days to get their story straight. Okay. You have now given them the chance to talk to legal counsel. Their story will change. That's why Eddie talked about completing the accident investigation form and getting it completed at the time of the incident, because at least we have a record of what they said. Because a lot of times employees' stories will change over time. So if you wait and delay the first report, you're giving them time to get their story straight. Okay. And finally, if you're in an OSHA, you're not partially exempt from OSHA, you're required to put it on your log within 7 calendar days. This is just a pro tip. Um, you can follow this, but you can use your first report, that information that you put to the carrier for your first report of injury, you can use that for your OSHA 301. As long as the first report contains all the questions on the 301. So what you need to do is get your state board form, and again, they're a little different in the different states, put it side by side by the 301. And typically there's 2 or 3 questions on the 301 that will not be on the first report. All you have to do is make a note when you call the claim in to the insurance carriers, add those 2 questions in the note section. And I say why that's important is when OSHA comes in, if they ever come in and do an inspection, first thing they're going to ask you for is your OSHA 300 log and your 301s. And if you don't have your 301s in file, which is basically an incident report, it's almost the same as your first report. If you don't have your 301s done, they're going to fine you for each claim. And it can add up really quickly. And so, OSHA's there to collect money from you. They're like the small town here in Georgia. They pull you over because they need money. And so they're looking, and if you had 20 incidents and you're missing 20 301s, you're going to get 20 citations. 25, yeah, it's going to be a penalty, a pretty big penalty. So again, you can use the first report of injury as long as it has the information from the 301. So you typically just have to, when you report the claim, say, can you add this information to our first report in the notes section? And whoever's the intake person at the insurance company will put it right on there. And then you just they always will send you a copy of the first report. Once you complete it, they'll email you a copy for your file, put it in your 301 folder, you're good to go. Now, Eddie, ask your question.
No, my question was, there's some employers that ask me, do I report it to the carrier or do I take care of it in-house and just pay the clinic? What are your feelings about that based on your experience? I know based on my experience, we should let the carrier know, even if it's an incident only claim, but advise the carrier just in case so that you're protected.
You just answered the question. At the very minimum, do it report only. That doesn't count against you on your claims history. It doesn't count on your EMOD. I mean, unless you letter them with report onlys. You got 100 employees and you send 100 report onlys, they're going to say, man, you're having a lot of frequency breeds severity. But, as long as you're controlling your frequency of these things, I would do it report only. If it's going to be a medical bill, you can file it. The medical bills, if it's medical only, it gets reduced 70% on your mod anyway. So it doesn't have much impact on your mod. If it's $1,000 bill that you're self-paying, it'll probably be a $400 or $500 bill for the insurance company because they run it through a fee schedule. And the fee schedule is always going to be less than they're going to bill you directly. So you're going to save money if you file the claim. Again, if you want to manage it, I will tell you this though, and I don't have this on here. Zach, make a note. We'll do this for future reference. We also should have maybe something on there called an incident log for first aid only. And a lot of employers will do first aid and they'll manage those small claims. They don't file a claim. They just manage it under first aid. They don't even file it. Keep a first aid log. and of all those things that you're managing for first aid only. First aid is not required to go on your OSHA log. And so, you know, make sure if you put something on your first aid log that you follow up a couple of days to make sure the person's okay. We had a claim last year with a client that had a blister and the guy let it get infected. They never followed up with him. He ended up having an amputation. It's now about a $600,000 claim from a blister on the back of his heel. And so if you know if you get a first aid claim, particularly, I mean, a lot of our clients are blue collar, and they might not have the best sanitary, you know, washing their hands and taking care of cleaning cuts, wound care. If they got just if you got a first aid claim and you treat it, follow up. If you have a medical only, they go to urgent care, get stitches. They might not, you know, it might even be stitches. They may just butterfly it closed. Make a log and follow up with the employee to make sure that the claim's okay. I can't tell you how, it doesn't happen often, but it happens often enough where that was a couple $100 claim that became an over $600,000 claim.
And it's
Right?
just lack of communication
Oh,
between
like a
the,
follow up.
yeah,
It's not really communication. You've treated them, you've tried taking care of them. They go back to work, but they just don't, you know, they don't manage. I mean, we've all cut ourselves at home, and you know, we go in and we do wound care and we clean it and we take care of it and we pay attention to it. But sometimes employees don't, and particularly if it's something, you know, where they're wearing gloves or they're, you know, it's on their foot, well, you can't see it unless you check it. You don't, and when you check in with the employee, you just don't know. So that's the accident happens. Okay, I got to speed up because I'm getting behind.
Just real quick, I think this was a good point to announce that we will have our February session on the OSHA log. So we're going to be talking about how to complete the log and also how to identify whether an injury is recordable or first aid. So be on the lookout. February, we're going to have another training just specifically on that topic.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to just quickly breeze through direction of medical. I think Zach could do 2 hours just on this one slide. But, you know, what I tell people is understand your state specific guidelines, particularly if you're an HR department in Miami, but you've got locations in 3 or 4 states. Understand jurisdictionally, the direction of medical is going to be different. Um, in Florida, you get to direct care. In Georgia, the employee gets to pick. And so, you know, it just changes a little bit depending on the state you're in. So make sure you understand that. And if you don't, give Eddie and Zach, they're experts on this direction of medical, give them a call. The paperwork you send to the employee, we've got an authorization for treatment form, but when you send paperwork with them, think about this. You want to make sure that you're setting the tone with that doctor. For example, send them a copy of the job description. Send them a copy of that transitional duty work is available. Sending them the paperwork that says, here's our insurance carrier, bill them so they don't bill your employee. I mean, that's another reason why employees go get attorneys. They get this big medical bill in the mail and they're scared to death and they think they got to pay it. So get the medical bill directed to the insurance carrier from the start. If you have authorization for treatment paperwork, you can take care of all three of those things. And then address to work, return to work. This is what I'm looking for from a physician. I want them to address return to work at every visit. Okay. But again, going back to the paperwork, if they don't know the job description and the physical demands of the employee, when they go for that first visit, Zach, who makes up the job description?
the employee, the claimant.
The
Oh
claimant
yeah.
does.
Yeah,
And you do,
you don't want that employee to be dictating care. That's why it's so important to establish these protocols with the medical center before you ever send your first patient. You should go out and meet with them, learn more about their practice, what they offer. They should learn more about you. They should have a full detailed profile about your company, knowing your return to work. Do you do a drug screen? Who's your insurance? Who's the point of contact when the doctor needs to call and review the care because there's just some red flags? Who are they going to call? If you don't have that established in advance, you're missing out on that enhanced communication that's needed to manage these claims.
and the truth is the medical practices are busy and they're not great communicators typically. You know, their doctors are doctors. They're not great because they want to return your phone call. One of the reasons we hired Zach is we had such a good working relationship with him. He was kind of our go-to guy. We call him and say, we got a problem on this file or this or that. He would connect connect the dots for the claim, and we dealt with them so much. Finally, one day we said, "Hey, we need you to come work with us." And we stole them, and then just make sure return to work is addressed at every visit. If it's not done and it's 30 days before the next appointment, that person's sitting out collecting benefits. Okay, we've got a sample authorization for treatment form. Again, if you'd like a copy of it, ping Zach or Eddie. Okay, on the physician consideration, again, I'm going to run through these. If you want more detail, I would encourage you. Zach's kind of our internal expert on this medical. He did it for 15 years. Uh, you want to know where they perform a drug test. You don't want to have an urgent care and you got to take them somewhere else for the drug test. So, if you got urgent care, make sure they got a SAMHSA certified lab. We found with this client yesterday, we're doing the claim review, they got 20 locations. For the locations, the urgent care no longer is doing drug tests. It's problematic for that employer. So it came out in our claim review. Will they address return to work? And also, who do they refer to? That's kind of a big deal if they need specialized care, who they refer to. This is all stuff we could talk about. We could do nothing but direction of medical for an hour. In fact, Zach, it probably should be a webinar in our webinar series of taking each one of these topics and going into greater detail. But for now, this is kind of the big three.
I think, Steve, on return to work, real quick, just to make a point, leadership, company leadership, upper level management, and the supervisors need to understand how important return to work really is for your entire insurance program and for that employee to not be sitting at home worried about bills.
Yeah.
Bringing him back and engaging him in his job or a similar job, light duty job, is very important. But you have to have, like you said before, that program in place well before the injury.
Well, and I've said this before that I've never seen a successful return to work program in my 42 years, ever. And I've dealt with Delta and Home Depot and Coke and Chick-fil-A, big companies. I've never seen a successful return to work program. I know Zach's like, what? It's a process. And what Eddie's saying is there's so many things that have to fall in place for it to work. And it's not that complicated. But if you don't really take the time pre-claim to map it out, and I think Zach mentioned that earlier, and Eddie certainly alluded to it, is you got to have a strategy before the claim ever happens. If we're trying to implement a return to work process after the claim, it doesn't work very well. So really focusing on it, it's not hard. It's just addressing a couple of key things. And again, we could do a whole workshop on each one of these topics. Return to work probably should be another one, Eddie, that we talk about, because just putting that process in place. But that's what we do to help clients, is we've done it so much, we kind of do the heavy lifting on it for you. So let's go over the incident analysis. I say walk softly and carry a big hammer, because that's how I feel sometimes, is we want to do an incident analysis, not to point fingers, but we want to review it for future safety training. We want to review the manager report for any red flags, and we want to include highlights in our monthly training. Now, the hammer is not beating people over the head. It's what you do with the information going forward. So the incident analysis is saying, all right, this already happened. What can we do moving forward to improve our process so this never happens again? What our goal is as consultants, as brokers, is taking all the information we have on incident analysis, bringing it to you and saying, hey, look, we can help your company on a leading versus lagging. Don't wait till bad stuff happens. Let's put stuff in place before it happens. But I want to go through this forms with you really quickly. And I know so the incident analysis has basically three parts. The first part is the employee report. Now you'll notice on here, again, for the sake of time, I'm going to zip through it, but you'll notice that we ask things like body part. We ask, when did you have the claim? Who did you notify? We're going to hold this supervisor accountable. If that supervisor knew about the claim and didn't report it to HR, we're going to know about it on the employee report. The body part thing is something that is important to me because body parts change. When they go to the doctor and they say they injured their shoulder and the doctor said there's nothing wrong with your shoulder, says, oh, well, my knee hurts too. Well, wait a minute, you didn't say anything about your knee being injured. And then we got this thing about pain, because if they tell us, if we know it's a small incident and they tell us their pain level is 10, that's sort of a red flag for us to say, ooh, this might be a problem. So the questions on our injury report, I've vetted this with hundreds and hundreds of employers. We take everybody's incident reports. Every time we take in a new client, we're always looking for process improvement on our form. So if you want to look at that form, again, ping Zach or Eddie, they'll go through it with you. Then we have the employee report. We also have the witness and the supervisor statement. The witness supervisor statement, the supervisor is basically like, hey, when did you know about the claim? How long have you known about the claim and what happened? Again, in Florida, as in Georgia, supervisor notice of a claim constitutes employer notice of a claim. If your supervisor knows about the claim, you, the employer, know about the claim. So making sure they report it, we not only catch it on the employee statement, but also on the supervisor statement. And then we've got this one form called the manager report. And this is just kind of sweeping through red flags, things that you should share with the adjuster of things going on with the employee. It could be, hey, they were disciplined 3 times for being late. This was their 4th time. They were going to be terminated. They said they were injured. Okay, that's going to be a red flag. If they delayed reporting, if the incident didn't match, in this case with the fall in a parking lot, the employee's incident report that they signed differed from the incident report they gave the adjuster, that's a red flag. Okay, so we want to make sure, what I find a lot of times in claims is the red flags don't get to the adjuster. So we have this manager report to do that. And then finally, we got this incident report. And the incident report is really, and what Eddie said, is we want to know why the claim happened. And we want to go through, is it we had a bad policy, somebody wasn't following the policy, the supervisor wasn't enforcing the policy, what caused the accident? And I got to tell you, you've got to ask why more than once. Okay, if you only ask why one time, it's going to be the employee caused it. And they didn't have their safety glasses on. They got steel in their eye because they didn't have their safety glasses. Why didn't they have their safety glasses? They didn't fit. They were fogging up. They weren't comfortable. Well, why didn't we talk about getting better safety glasses? Well, we don't have the budget for it. Is it better to spend an extra $15 on glasses versus this eye injury that's going to cost us 150 grand? So when we ask why, typically it points back to management or supervisor. Okay. So I'm not going to go through these in detail. We talked about them just to catch up. But we got another keyword, Zach.
All right, this is the first keyword, hammer. So everyone, if you're collecting the CEU for HRCI or SHRM, please write down hammer. You will need this keyword when you're completing your program evaluation at the end of the session. So it is hammer.
Hammer, like hammer time. Like they're telling me hammer time, I got to catch up. This is the action plan we talked about. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to impress upon you, next series, we're going to talk about fleet. And we're going to take this same P4 structure we talked about for workers' comp, and we're going to apply it to fleet. We're going to be able to do it in one session because you've already got the framework. The framework is the same, and then we're going to cover cyber and EPLI. But here's what I want to tell you. And again, I know we got 10 minutes to wrap this up. This action plan is what you do the first 3 days on every claim. You should get in the discipline of every claim you have. If it is small medical only, if it's a first aid claim, or it's a law, something you think could be bigger. If it's first 3 days, you put the Band-Aid on the finger. Hey, on the 3rd day, check and make sure the person's okay. If they're okay, there's no red flags, there's nothing else going on, the person's been back at work, close the file. What I find is a lot of these, they're smoldering and nobody knows about it, and they're smoldering. We don't think they're still on fire. And so we just leave the campfire. Next thing we know, we come back and the whole house is burned down. So look at every claim and make sure if you think it's medical only, it stays medical only. If you see red flags on it, this is another pro tip. When you call in a claim to your insurance carrier, there's an intake person. Based on the severity of the claim, they triage it either the medical only, which is basically just paying the bills, or a lost time adjuster that's looking at the claim. If you think a claim is small, but it could be big, it's smoldering, go ahead when you report the claim and say, I want this going to a lost time adjuster, because they'll call you, they'll do an incident report. It triggers a different workflow at the insurance carrier. But let's say that you know the claim is going to be lost time. What we say is in 7 days, get the information to the insurance carrier. You're going to have to send them a copy of the wage statement, the incident report, the post offer health questionnaire, all the things you have in your file that you think are going to help the adjuster decide whether he or she is going to accept or deny the claim and manage that claim. In Florida, they have 14 days. That's not a long time to accept or deny the claim. If you have the information in your file and you don't give them to them in a timely manner for them to make their decision, let's say they accept the claim, and then on the third week you send them the post offer health questionnaire and they find out they could have denied the claim, probably won't be able to because it's not newly discovered information. The judge will probably throw the information out. So the burden on you, again, think about this on the 85% that's managed by the employer. You manage a 3-day action plan. You manage the 7 days of getting the information to the adjuster, and then the adjuster kind of carries the ball and carries most of the weight after that. So really, really important you follow this 3, 7, and 14-day action plan. In Georgia, it's 21 days, so it'd be 3, 7, 21 days. Arkansas, every state has a little bit different time frames to accept the claim, but this is a good 3, 7, and then how long do they have to accept the claim? And follow this. If they're waiting on you, the number one litigated thing is you don't do your wage statement correctly as employers. If you don't have it to the penny calculated, you don't give them the correct wage information, it is going to become an assessment issue in the state of Florida. They do it all the time. So getting this information exactly right for the adjuster is going to help you a lot in claims.
And just a couple quick points. I know we're limited on time, but one thing so important is to show care and concern for an injured employee. Make sure your supervisors are trained to check in with that employee. How are you feeling? Send a get well card. Some other things, monitor for no-shows. If they're not showing up to their follow-up appointments, make sure you're getting those notices, check with the employee, and that they're continuing care. And then lastly, if the employee does start at the hospital, immediately get them to the Ahmed clinic as soon as they're discharged so that Ahmed clinic can provide the restrictions. You don't have to go by what the hospital says. The hospitals are going to maybe do some unnecessary testing, referrals. Let that Ahmed doctor make the decision for return to work. Just a
Really
couple of things I wanted to
important.
throw in there.
Really, that last one is really important. You don't want to leave an employee in the care of the hospital, the emergency room. It's going to not only get costly, but once you allow that care to continue, they become the authorized treating physician. You can't change it at that point. So as soon as the emergency is over, get them to the Ahmed clinic. And I will tell you, the employer, you better be on top of this because sometimes these adjusters are overwhelmed and the claim file sits there and the person's doing their follow-up visits with the emergency room doctor and the cow's out of the barn and it's too late at that point. So I kind of want to wrap up by just talking about this one quick slide, the life of a claim. And we talked about pre-hire, post-offer prevention, and the claim happens. And I want to kind of leave you, and Zach made some great points. I think we need to do another one on the direction of medical and all the things he talked about after the claim. I think it would be awesome.
Oh, I could go on for hours. And yes, we do actually have some stuff planned for 2026. I'm not ready to announce it, but we have some exciting partners we're going to be working with to put together some new webinars. So you're definitely going to want to stay in tune for what we have planned for next year.
Perfect. But think about when the claim happens. That claimant, that injured employee has other people, family members, employees that hired attorneys. You got attorneys, billboard advertising, and you got the employer. Those are the three communication channels. I can tell you, kind of dovetailing what Zach said, the employer usually has the low, they whisper, hey, we care about you. Hey, we want to help you. They might not even call the employee. Supervisor might even call them. They're bombarded by advice from other people. So what Zach said is hugely important. And Eddie knows this being on the employee.
Oh, did Steve freeze over there?
I think so.
All right, well, I think thankfully we got most of the good knowledge out of him before he froze. Let's see if he comes back in a second.
I think if we go through this graph just to get everybody going so we can get into the
Yeah, because
prizes
we
and
do have the
everything
prize
else.
wheel where we don't want to
Yeah.
miss out
So
on that.
let's proceed with the slides and I'll take over from here.
Okay.
So you can reduce about 40% of the cost of the claim if you're involved in the claim and you trust the process. So bottom line, make sure that your employees are trained, make sure that the supervisors are trained, make sure that you have a written process for return to work, and that you have a clinic that's able to service you properly and that you can communicate with. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach. And Zach, go ahead and do the prize wheel.